Hello Varlets. Looks like patch 14 has arrived sooner than expected. I was thinking it would come out maybe next week, but it looks like the gigantic number of changes we looked at last week is live right now. I've taken a look through the notes and it seems like what we received in the provisional patch last week is largely intact, save for a couple of changes. It appears that the dominate talent for the Ogryns is getting nerfed. They have reduced the rending upon killing elites from 30% down to 15%. It was probably doing too much in high level missions where elites were abundant and so effectively giving you incredible uptime on a powerful rending buff. The other change is mostly cosmetic in that the sound effect for the Vrax 7 Headhunter, that's the single shot variant, had its audio tuned up to sound a little more like a sniper, which is in line with the other changes it received. So, given that the patch notes are essentially what we saw from the last time, in this video, I will go over some of the interesting changes that have gotten the community talking since the last one. Starting with the Psyker. Brain Rupture has gotten a whole string of buffs, but just how effective is it now? I'll bring up the changes here so you can see what has improved. The most noticeable thing that has changed is the increase in damage modifiers against Carapace, Maniac and Unyielding. With Brain Rupture alone, you can one-shot all Maniac enemies except for Rages and Mutants. These now require 2 shots, which is a pretty good improvement. A key annoyance is the fact that 2 enemies, Bulwarks and Drake Gunners, are so close to the 2-shot breakpoint. But even with Kinetic Presence, which has been nerfed from 10% to 5% damage, it's barely not enough. However, if you opt for Warp Rider, which increases your base damage as your peril increases, you can comfortably meet the 2-shot breakpoints for these enemies. Scab Rages, Reapers, Maulers and Crushers all require 3 Brain Ruptures to take down even with both Warp Rider and Kinetic Presence. However, having Empowered Psionics activated reduces the breakpoints on Maulers, Scab Rages and Reapers to 2, and it also allows you to one-shot Drag Rages. Good changes for Brain Rupture and improves its potency in the higher difficulties. Next, we've got Assail. In this patch, Assail saw its primary spam attack take a 20% damage reduction, while its secondary aiming attack saw a pretty sizable damage boost. How significant are these changes? Well, you can definitely feel that spamming Assail is not as strong as it was before. Dumping all your darts into a pack of elites isn't going to give you a wall of kill notifications as often as it did before. However, because they didn't touch its regeneration speed, spamming it into hordes is still okay. That being said, this change fails to resolve the problem of Psykers spamming Assail at lower difficulties, making everyone else bystanders in the game. As for its aim attack, the damage boost is definitely noticeable. It's meeting a lot more 2-shot breakpoints for various enemies like Flamers and, most importantly, Gunners. This is even before we have Empowered Psionics. Moving on to Smite. The most significant thing to happen to Smite after patch 14 is that the infinite Smite bug has been fixed. But in return, Smite got a massive damage boost with Empowered Psionics. While the damage boost is significant on paper, in reality it's barely enough to wipe out a Poxwalker horde. Not exactly great even with the changes. However, if you pair it with other abilities, it becomes a lot more respectable in being able to hold a group of regular enemies back and kill them, whereas last time you'd be standing there for ages, waiting for enemies to slowly get tickled to death. Build variety is definitely better with this change, but I think Smite needs a little more love than what it has received now. Telkine Shield has received pretty substantial buffs, key of which is its increased durability and duration. While it can now withstand the full barrage of a single gunner firing at it until it needs to reload, the key thing for me was that it could now tank an extra hit from Poxhounds and Mutants charging into it. This gives your Telkine Shield with the Enervating Threshold modifier even more defensive utility against specials. Love the buffs to the shield. Next, we're going to take a look at the changes made to Zealots. Blades of Faith has received quite a bit of improvements. While the damage boost and flak armor modifier meant it could reach some breakpoints it couldn't before, the most significant change to me is the fact that it can pierce one Poxwalker to hit targets behind it. This simple change improves the consistency of the throwing knives significantly. Gone are the days where you have to worry about a Poxwalker pulling a "Get down Mr. President" saving the shotgunner you were trying to take out. Excellent change, makes the playstyle a lot more fluid. The nerf to Chorus of Spiritual Fortitude is exactly as it reads. It can no longer push back monsters outside of the first and final pulse of the ability, reducing its capability for you to shove monsters off ledges. In terms of weapons, the change to the Crusher has made it feel a lot nicer to use. I was pleasantly surprised by how good it felt to use after these changes, but more testing is needed to be done, though I feel it's now much more relevant of a weapon than it was before. Moving on to Vets next. While Vets did get a bunch of buffs to many of their abilities, I'll only be going over things that have a tangible change. So for something like Infiltrate, which received a buff to its duration and a reduction in cooldown, there really isn't anything to test out there. First on the list, Smoke Grenades. While I get the idea of adding a stagger on the detonation of smoke grenades, the fact that it is a pretty weak stagger kind of makes the buff almost pointless. I was hoping that it would at least be strong enough to get gunners to stop shooting or strong enough to disorientate enemies for a couple of seconds, but that doesn't seem to be the case. The increased duration is nice and all, but I imagine most of us still feel that smoke grenades are more of a detriment to the team than a benefit, since it really obscures your vision as well. Volley Fire or Executioner Stance got a buff in that it is now able to tick its cooldown while the buff is up, allowing you the potential to get your cooldown back before running out of time if you can chain kills effectively. This comes at the cost of an additional 10 seconds cooldown added in for a total of 35 seconds. A little bit of a nerf, but also much better for longer engagements, especially on the higher difficulties. By far, the most important change in this entire patch is the fact that Counterfire now highlights Scab Stalkers. Please enjoy what you're about to witness. Now, I don't know if the patch notes are wrong, but the Veteran's Talent Exploit Weakness, which used to give rending on crits, was changed to apply 10% brittleness on crit, which stacked up to 2 times. Brittleness, for those of you who don't know, is basically rending but applies to everyone, a debuff on the enemy rather than a buff to yourself. However, in-game, the description says it's meant for melee critical hits, no longer applying to range critical hits. This is a pretty big nerf to the talent and to range builds, especially for recon last gun builds, which are already taking quite a beating as changes go. Since we are on Vets, I want to direct your attention to the changes the plasma gun is receiving, specifically the change to its cleave value. Yes, it is now 100 cleave, not a typo. Do you know what 100 cleave looks like? No? Here, allow me to demonstrate. So that is definitely a welcome change to the weapon, no doubt about it, as I'm sure you'll all agree. Finally, let's take a look at Ogryns. The rock got some good buffs, allowing you to regenerate them more quickly throughout a mission, but also some improvements to its damage against maniac enemies and the ability to stagger monsters if you throw them at their face. In terms of damage breakpoints, the buff to maniac damage allows you to one-shot flamers on body shots where before, it would have left them at 200 HP on damnation. A wonderful improvement. The ability to stagger monsters by throwing a rock at their weak spot gives you more utility. You can now save allies from being eaten by a Chaos Spawn and a Beast of Nurgle from afar. Truly a rock and stone moment for all rock lovers out there. Since we are talking about Ogryns, one of the biggest changes I've seen is a buff to their kickback. Lots more ammo to spend, more damage from further away, and better cleave really makes this weapon a force to be reckoned with. Now, it is a certified flak cannon, literally destroying flak shooters from 20 meters away with ease. I think I'm going to be using this weapon more often, and it was already one of my favorite weapons before this buff. Alright, that is all the testing I have time for now. There's a bunch more stuff I'd like to go over in detail and take my time to explore, but these are the most significant changes to me at this moment. With patch 14 here, it means I can go back to making builds and guides when before I had to hold everything back because, well, what will be the point of making guides when they are about to change literally in the next week? So, now I have much to do in the coming weeks and months, much to do. This brings us to the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed it and have found the testing informative. Let's talk about some of the changes in the comments below now that we've gotten to actually experience it. What do you like? What don't you like? Let's hear it all. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Varlets.